There are moments in life when a single
Thank
second
you.
is enough to divide everything into before
Thank
and
you so
after.
much.
For Lucas Meyer, that second arrived on an ordinary Thursday morning in San Diego, when the smell of oil still clung to his hands and the quiet hum of a luxury engine slid into the narrow street outside his old garage like a sound that did not belong. It didn't roar. It didn't demand attention. It simply arrived. Smooth, controlled, expensive, in a way that felt almost indecent against cracked sidewalks, rusted fences, and sun-bleached buildings that had learned to recognize only work boots and tired footsteps. Lucas looked up from beneath the open hood of a weathered aircraft engine, a stubborn old turbine core he'd been rebuilding for a private owner who couldn't afford a hangar mechanic's rates. Years ago, Lucas had been an aviation technician. Then life had happened. A funeral, a promise, a child's small hand holding his finger like an anchor, and a job that needed him close to home. The roll-up garage door was half open, letting a pale stripe of California sunlight spill across oil-stained concrete. The air was heavy with metal, grease, and the faint salt of the Pacific drifting inland. Inside the garage, time moved the way it always did here. Slow, patient, honest. A ceiling fan clicked overhead like an aging heart that refused to quit. Old tools hung from scarred walls, their handles worn smooth by decades of hands that had come and gone. This place had once belonged to Lucas's father, and before that, his grandfather. It had never been beautiful, but it had always been true. On the floor, Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, sat cross-legged on a flattened cardboard box, her hair loosely tied with a rubber band she had found somewhere in the garage. She was drawing with intense concentration, tongue caught between her teeth as if the wrong breath might ruin everything. Her paper was filled with impossible machines. Airplane wings fused with gears, strange joints bending at angles no textbook would allow. To anyone else, it looked like a child's imagination running wild. To Lucas, it looked like curiosity trying to become a language. "Dad," Lily said without looking up, holding a small mechanical puppet Lucas had built for her from spare parts. Tiny hinges, a spring, and a finger-jointed arm that moved when you turned a screw. "Why does this joint stop moving when I bend it like this?" Lucas wiped his hands on a rag and knelt beside her. He turned the puppet slowly, watching how the joint caught. "Because it's too tight," he said gently. "When something is forced to stay in one position, it can't move naturally." Lily tilted her head. "Does it hurt?" Lucas paused. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that comes from knowing something too well. "Sometimes," he said. "Machines aren't that different from people." That was when the unfamiliar sound filled the air again, soft, refined, out of place. Lucas straightened and stepped outside. Parked in front of the garage was a white Bentley Bentayga, polished so perfectly it reflected the sky like glass. It looked unreal on that street, like a photograph pasted into the wrong frame. The rear door opened slowly. A young woman stepped out, carefully, deliberately. Metal braces encased both her legs, gleaming in the sun. Each movement required thought, precision, patience. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, framing a face that was beautiful, but tired. Tired in a way Lucas recognized immediately. Not the exhaustion of a bad night's sleep, but the deeper kind that comes from enduring something day after day without relief. Behind her emerged another woman. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a white tailored suit that probably cost more than everything inside the garage combined. Her posture was straight, her movements controlled, and her eyes were sharp with the practiced confidence of someone who had spent years being listened to, and never quite gotten used to being ignored. This was Rachel Carter, CEO, billionaire, mother. But Lucas didn't know that yet. All he saw was the way her eyes flicked across the garage, quick, assessing, uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether she had made a terrible mistake by stopping here. "I'm sorry to bother you," Rachel said, her voice polite but distant. "Our car overheated on the freeway. Could you take a look?" Lucas nodded. "Of course." He lifted the hood and leaned in. Coolant smell. A small leak. A hose clamp that looked like it had been tightened by someone who believed force was the same as care. He worked quietly, tightening, checking, testing. But while his hands did their job, his attention kept drifting. The young woman, Emily, though he didn't know her name yet, was trying to sit on an old wooden bench outside the garage. The rigid braces made even that simple act difficult. She shifted once, then again, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly each time. Lucas noticed, not because he was staring, but because he had spent his entire life noticing when something didn't move the way it should. Because in engines and in bodies, pain often announces itself through small compensations long before it screams. While he checked the engine, his eyes flicked back to Emily again and again. 6 times in 15 minutes. Each time her shoulders lifted a fraction, as if her spine was bracing for something that had already arrived. Finally, Lucas closed the hood. He walked over and knelt in front of her, not towering above her, not speaking down, but meeting her at eye level, as if dignity was a tool and he knew how to use it. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I hope this isn't rude, but is your brace too tight?" Emily blinked. The question hit her with the force of something unexpected and deeply personal. People usually stared, or avoided her entirely, or drowned her in forced sympathy. No one ever asked that. "How?" Emily swallowed, as if the word itself weighed too much. "How did you know?" "I'm not a doctor," Lucas said honestly. "I'm a mechanic. I can tell when something doesn't fit the way it should." Rachel's head snapped up. "What are you saying?" she demanded, alarm sharpening her voice. "That brace was designed by the best engineers in the world." Lucas didn't argue. He simply said, "May I take a closer look?" "Just look. I won't touch anything without permission." Emily looked at her mother. For a long moment, Rachel hesitated, caught between fear and pride, between the memory of 1,000 appointments and the reality of her daughter's tightened jaw. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. Lucas asked again for consent before placing his hands on the metal. His fingers traced the joints slowly, carefully, like someone reading a language that had been written without compassion. He tested angles, flexibility, resistance. He didn't pull. He didn't force. He listened. Then he stopped. "This knee joint," Lucas said quietly, "is locked at about 15 degrees. That's not enough range. When you walk naturally, the knee needs to flex far more, especially during swing phase." He moved his hand a few inches upward. "So your hip is doing extra work. It's rotating more than it should, and your lower back is taking the punishment." He looked up at Emily. "That's why your lower back hurts, isn't it?" Emily's eyes filled with tears so fast it frightened her. "How do you know my back hurts?" she whispered. "You're leaning," Lucas said gently. "Not much. 7 degrees, but it's consistent. Your spine is trying to reduce pressure. That's not posture. That's survival." Rachel felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 5 years of specialists. 5 years of expensive words. And no one had ever said this. "So you're telling me," Rachel said slowly, "that it was designed wrong?" Lucas shook his head. "Not wrong, just incomplete. They designed it for technology, for sensors, for metrics, for how it looks on paper." He met Emily's gaze. "They forgot how the human body actually moves." For the first time in 11 years, Emily dared to speak the question she had buried under politeness and pain. "Can you fix it?" Lucas saw something then. He saw his brother Noah lying in a hospital bed years ago, smiling bravely while saying goodbye to a future he would never have. He saw fluorescent lights and the unbearable quiet after doctors left. He saw his own hand covering Noah's, and the promise that had been made in a voice so low it barely counted as sound. "Don't let hope die just because it isn't convenient." "I don't know," Lucas said softly, "but I can try." That night, Rachel stood alone in her oceanfront home, staring out at the dark Pacific. Moonlight shattered across the waves like broken glass. For 11 years, she had tried to buy forgiveness. The best doctors, the most expensive devices, the most advanced technology. And now a man in oil-stained clothes, living in an old garage, was offering something money had never managed to secure. Hope. She was afraid. Afraid he would fail. Afraid he would succeed. And afraid of what it would mean if he did. Because it would mean she had been doing everything she could, and it still hadn't been enough. When Emily rolled into her mother's room later that night, her voice was calm in a way that frightened Rachel more than tears ever could. "Mom," Emily said, "let me try this time." Rachel knelt and pulled her daughter into her arms, realizing something with devastating clarity. For 11 years, she had tried to save her child with money, and money had never been the same thing as care. The next morning, Rachel called Lucas. "I want you to try," she said. "But if there's any sign of danger, we stop immediately." "I understand," Lucas replied. When they left, Lucas carried the brace into the garage as if it were something sacred and fragile. Lily watched silently from her cardboard seat, the little puppet resting in her lap. "Dad?" she asked. "Are you going to help her walk?" Lucas swallowed. "I'm going to try." Lily nodded, as if that answer meant everything. Lucas spent the afternoon working without noticing the hours pass. The garage settled into its familiar rhythm, the muted scrape of metal against metal, the low hum of tools waking from long rest, the ceiling fan clicking above him like a metronome for courage. He laid the brace across the old workbench, aligning it as carefully as one might place a sleeping child. The metal was beautiful in its way, light, polished, expensive. Every surface spoke of intention. Every component had been signed off by teams, committees, and certifications. And yet, the truth sat quietly between those parts. Lucas loosened a strap, then another. He measured the knee lock again, tracing the arc it allowed and the arc it denied. He sketched quickly, graphite smudging his fingertips, drawing the leg not as a diagram, but as a sequence of moments. Heel strike, weight transfer, hip rotation, push-off. He paused. For years, Lucas had learned to listen, not with his ears alone, but with the same attention he once gave engines on the brink of failure. Machines always told you what was wrong, if you knew how to stand still long enough. This brace was telling him something now, not loudly, not urgently, but clearly. The knee had been made to obey the device, not the body. The hip had been forced to apologize for that mistake, and the spine, patient, overworked, had taken the rest. Across the garage, Lily watched him. "Dad," she said after a while, "do you remember when you fixed Mr. Alvarez's truck and it still made that noise?" Lucas smiled faintly. "I do." "You didn't give it back," Lily continued. "You said it wasn't ready." He nodded. "That's right. Even though he was mad." "Yes." Lily considered this, then held up her puppet. "So you won't give this back until it stops hurting her?" Lucas looked at the puppet's little stiff joint, caught, refusing to bend unless you loosened the screw. He reached out and squeezed Lily's shoulder gently. "I won't," he said. "Not if I can help it." That night, After Lily fell asleep on the small cot behind the office partition, Lucas stayed awake under the yellow light. He dismantled the brace piece by piece, laying each component in neat rows. He reduced weight where weight served only pride. He marked pressure points where flesh would protest long before metal ever did. When exhaustion came, it didn't announce itself with sleepiness. It came as doubt. Who are you to do this? What if you hurt her? What if the system is right and you are wrong? Lucas leaned back against the workbench and closed his eyes. Noah's face came to him as it always did. Too thin, too pale, smiling anyway. "Don't let them lose hope," his brother had said. Lucas opened his eyes and picked up his pencil. By midday, when the Bentley returned, Lucas's hands were steady only because he had learned how to move while afraid. Emily stepped out first this time, her expression composed, almost serene. Rachel followed, her eyes scanning the space with a tension she could not hide. Lucas explained what he had changed. He explained what he had not. "I can stop at any point," he said. "If she feels pain, we stop." Rachel nodded. "I'll be right here." Lucas knelt again, asking permission before touching anything. He fitted the brace slowly, checking each strap, each joint, as if time itself were fragile. "Are you ready?" he asked. Emily took a breath. "Yes." She stood. At first, relief moved through her face, genuine, unmistakable relief. The weight felt different. The pressure shifted. Emily blinked, surprised by the lightness of it. Then she took a step. The second step followed. On the third, something went wrong, not as drama, but as physics. A strap near the ankle, slick with sweat, shifted half an inch. The edge of a metal bracket, rounded, but not enough, kissed skin under tension. Emily's cry cut through the garage, sudden and raw. Her ankle twisted, metal scraped, blood bloomed red against silver. Rachel screamed Emily's name and rushed forward, pulling her daughter into her arms with a strength that was almost violent. "That's enough," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "That's enough." Lucas froze. The sight of blood snapped him backward through time, to hospital rooms, to apologies that came too late, to Noah's fingers tightening around his own. "I'm so sorry," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Rachel didn't look at him. She helped Emily into the car, her movements efficient, protective, final. As the door closed, Emily turned her head. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were clear. "Don't give up," she said. "Please." Then they were gone. The garage fell silent in a way Lucas had never heard before. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at the dark stain where blood had touched concrete. He reached for his phone, then stopped. He didn't know what to say that could undo harm. Behind him, Lily stood silently, holding a mug of warm milk with both hands. "You need this," she said. Lucas took it with trembling fingers. "I hurt her," he whispered. Lily sat beside him, small shoulder pressing into his arm as if her body could keep his from breaking. "You didn't mean to," she said. "That doesn't change it." She was quiet a long time. Then she lifted the puppet and loosened the tiny screw at its stiff joint. The arm moved smoothly after that, almost effortlessly. Lily didn't say, "See?" She didn't need to. She only said, "Uncle Noah told you not to give up on people who need help." Lucas closed his eyes. That night, Lucas received a message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Emily. I'm okay. The cut is small. Please don't stop." He stared at the words until they blurred. Then he stood, turned on the lights, and went back to the workbench. This time he didn't adjust. He erased. He began again. And as the city slept, Lucas Meyer finally understood what the brace and the body had been trying to tell him all along. The problem wasn't the knee. It was where the balance began. He drew a straight vertical line down the page. Not a leg, not a brace, a line of balance. He remembered the way his father used to explain engines to him when he was a boy. If the weight isn't centered where motion begins, his father would say, you can strengthen every part, and it will still fail. Motion begins at the core, not the ankle, not the knee. The hip decides, and everything else follows. Lucas's breath caught. He rebuilt the design from the pelvis down, not as a device that forced a body into obedience, but as a structure that allowed the body to lead. He replaced rigid connectors with adaptive elements. He improved clearance at the ankle, padded contact points where skin would protest, and added a small stabilizing mechanism near the hip, where the first negotiations with gravity actually happen. He tested it on himself again and again. He walked, he fell once, he adjusted twice, he refused shortcuts. On the fourth day, Lucas stared at the new brace and felt something close to fear. This one was different, not flashy. Not advanced in the way brochures brag. Humble. And if it failed, it would fail honestly. He called Rachel. I redesigned it, he said. From the beginning. If you're willing, I'd like one last chance. Silence held them. I don't know if I can put her through that again, Rachel said quietly. I understand, Lucas replied. If you say no, I won't ask again. Another pause. Then Rachel spoke, her voice low and steady. We'll come tomorrow. But this time, I want a doctor present. That's fair, Lucas said. When the call ended, Lucas sat with his head in his hands, not triumphant, exposed. The next morning, a black sedan arrived alongside the Bentley. From it stepped Dr. Alan Reed, one of California's most respected orthopedic specialists, a man who had followed Emily's case for years. His posture was stiff, his expression carefully neutral. He looked Lucas up and down. You're the mechanic, he said. Yes, sir. Dr. Reed's gaze moved to the brace on the workbench. I advised against this. I know, Lucas replied. Rachel stood between them like a boundary line that had learned to breathe. Emily watched quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Lucas explained the new design without trying to sound smarter than he was. He spoke in clean sentences, the way he spoke to engines. What it does, what it doesn't, what happens if it fails. Dr. Reed listened, arms crossed, skepticism etched into every line of his face. This violates established orthopedic standards, the doctor said finally. It follows mechanical ones, Lucas answered. The body moves before the standards are written. Dr. Reed's eyes narrowed. If this goes wrong, I stop, Lucas said immediately. At the first sign of danger. Emily looked up. I want to try. Dr. Reed studied her for a long moment, then sighed. All right, he said, but I'm watching every second. The garage seemed to hold its breath. Lucas fitted the brace slowly, deliberately. He checked every strap, every contact point. He made sure the ankle clearance was right, that nothing would bite skin when tension shifted. He asked for Emily's consent before every change. How does it feel? He asked. Emily shifted her weight slightly. Different, she said. Not lighter, just right. Lucas stepped back. I won't hold you, he said. I'll be here, but you have to stand on your own. Emily nodded. She stood. Seconds passed. Her body did not tremble. Her face changed, not into a grin, not into a performance, but into something quieter, deeper, as if her nervous system was encountering a reality it had forgotten existed. Mom, she whispered, voice breaking. I don't hurt. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Dr. Reed leaned forward, his professional detachment cracking just enough to reveal disbelief. Emily took a step, then another. Her knee bent smoothly. Her hip rotated naturally. The brace moved with her, not against her. The movement looked ordinary, and that was the miracle. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she walked. I'm walking, she said, breath shattering. I'm really walking. Rachel sank to the floor, sobbing without restraint, years of guilt pouring out in waves she could no longer keep behind glass. Lucas stood frozen, fingers gripping the edge of the workbench, afraid to breathe, as if breath might remind the world to take this away. Dr. Reed whispered numbers under his breath, angles, compensation patterns, gait phases, then stopped speaking altogether. Emily crossed the length of the garage and turned. She didn't run. She didn't rush. She walked into her mother's arms, standing. Outside, neighbors had gathered without realizing it. Someone clapped once, hesitant, as if applause might break the spell. Then another. Then a woman cried openly, covering her mouth like she was ashamed of hope. Lucas looked at Lily, who had stepped into the doorway holding her puppet. Lily loosened the tiny screw again, watching the arm move smoothly. Then she looked up at her father as if to say, "See? Not force, just the right place to begin." But even as joy filled the garage, a heavier truth settled quietly into Lucas's chest, because he knew what came next. Systems do not yield easily, and miracles, once seen, demand to be explained, or erased. The first letter arrived 2 days later. Thick envelope, heavy paper, language that didn't ask questions, only issued consequences. Unauthorized modification of a Class II medical device. Violation of federal regulations. Immediate cessation required. A deadline sat near the bottom like a quiet threat. 7 days. Lucas folded the letter and placed it on the workbench beside the brace. Hope and prohibition touching the same inch of wood. Behind him, Lily stood very still. Is it bad? She asked. It's complicated, Lucas said. She nodded, because children can accept complexity when adults stop lying about it. By afternoon, neighbors stopped by in ones and twos, pretending to have errands. Some offered congratulations. Some offered warnings. One man shook his head. You can't fight companies like that. Lucas didn't answer. He wasn't trying to fight. He was trying to protect. Across town, Rachel Carter read the same letter forwarded by her legal team. Then another message. Then another. The dialect was familiar. Measured concern, professional distance, subtle blame. Rachel closed her laptop and watched Emily practice slow steps across the living room floor. No braces now, only careful movement and a body learning itself again. Does it hurt? Rachel asked. Emily shook her head. No. Rachel watched the way her daughter's shoulders didn't lift in anticipation anymore. Watched how her spine no longer negotiated pain like a debt collector. I won't let them take this away from you, Rachel said. Emily stopped walking. Mom, please don't turn this into a war. Rachel flinched. I don't mean don't protect him, Emily said gently. I mean, don't make it about power. This happened because someone cared enough to listen. Rachel sat down, suddenly exhausted. For the first time, she understood something she had never admitted. Control had been her armor, not only against the world, but against guilt. That evening, Dr. Alan Reed called. I need to be careful, he said, voice low. I've been advised not to comment publicly. Rachel understood at once. You're afraid of losing your license. Yes, she swallowed. I won't ask you to risk it. There was a pause. But, Dr. Reed continued, I also won't lie. If I'm asked what I saw, I'll tell the truth. It wasn't everything, but it was a crack in the wall. Rachel did not schedule a press conference. She answered a single question because Emily asked her to. They stood before cameras with no stagecraft, no glossy banners, no corporate spin. Emily stood on her own 2 feet. For 11 years, Rachel said, voice steady, I spent everything I had on the best medicine money could buy, and my daughter still lived in pain. Her hand rested on Emily's shoulder, not possessive, not protective, but present. A man in an old garage noticed something no one else did. He asked a question. He listened. And he helped my daughter walk without pain. A reporter lifted a microphone. Isn't it dangerous to allow unlicensed individuals to modify medical devices? Rachel met his gaze. What's dangerous, she said quietly, is a system that mistakes paperwork for care. Emily stepped forward. My name is Emily Carter, she said, voice trembling but clear. For 11 years, I was treated like a case file, not a person. Mr. Meyer treated me like a human being. She inhaled. Please don't punish him for that. The video spread like a match finding dry grass. Support poured in. Parents, patients, people who recognized themselves in Emily's words. So did criticism. Doctors warned about precedent. Executives spoke of liability. Lawyers spoke of risk, like risk was more sacred than suffering. Lucas watched it from the garage, volume low, Lily's head resting against his arm. Are you in trouble? Lily asked. Yes, Lucas said. Will you stop helping people? He looked at Noah's old photo tucked into the corner of the workbench, looked at the puppet, looked at the brace. No, he said. I won't. That night, a knock came at the garage door. A woman stood there, rain clinging to her coat, her expression intent and unreadable. Lucas Meyer? She asked. Yes. My name is Dr. Serena Vale, she said. I teach biomedical engineering at Stanford. Lucas stepped aside. Dr. Vale didn't praise. She didn't perform amazement. She simply examined. She measured the brace like someone reading a living argument. She tested its adaptive responses. She checked contact points. She asked Emily questions later about sensation, fatigue, pain, fear. Then she returned to Lucas's bench and wrote notes in a small, worn notebook. Finally, she looked up. You're self-taught, she said. Yes. No one taught you dynamic center of balance distribution, pelvic stabilization coupling, or adaptive load transfer? No. Dr. Vale removed her glasses and wiped at her eyes, an action so human it startled Lucas more than any threat had. This is extraordinary, she said softly. Not because it's clever, because it's honest. She closed her notebook. If the system challenges you, she continued, it will be because you exposed something it forgot. I'm willing to say that out loud. Lucas stared at her. Why? Dr. Vale's voice stayed gentle. Because progress doesn't ask permission. It asks responsibility. Then she added quieter, as if the sentence belonged to someone else's grief, and because someone needs to remind them what medicine is for. The hearing room was smaller than Lucas had imagined. No towering columns, no dramatic light, just pale walls, long tables, and people who spoke in ways that left little room for uncertainty. Lucas sat with his hands folded. He wore his cleanest shirt. It still felt like a costume. Representatives from boards and associations spoke in measured tones. They acknowledged Emily's improvement. They acknowledged the emotional impact. They emphasized caution. "This is not about intention," one of them said. "It is about precedent." Lucas listened without interrupting. When it was his turn, he stood. "I'm not here to argue against standards," he said, voice calm though his throat tightened. "I understand why they exist. I only ask that they remain open to learning." He swallowed. "I didn't set out to change a field. I tried to help one person. I asked how her body felt. Then I listened." Dr. Serena Vale spoke next. She presented the brace not as a miracle, but as mechanics, center of balance, load transfer, adaptive movement, grounded in principles so basic it was almost embarrassing they'd been forgotten. "This design does not reject medicine," she said. "It completes it." Dr. Alan Reed testified too, carefully, truthfully, as if truth itself needed protective padding. "I saw a gait pattern normalize," he said. "I saw pain reduce. I saw a patient improve beyond what we achieved in years." The panel asked questions. They tested. They measured. They deliberated. Outside, Rachel waited with Emily. Emily stood, leaning lightly against the railing. No wheelchair, no brace, just a body learning to trust gravity. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked. Emily smiled. "I used to be afraid of never walking. Compared to that, this feels small." Hours later, Lucas emerged. He didn't smile, but he didn't look defeated either. The decision was careful, conditional, and unprecedented. Lucas would be granted a provisional authorization to work, under academic supervision, with strict reporting, mandatory safety trials, and formal certification. His designs would be reviewed, his cases limited, his garage subject to inspection. It was not freedom. It was a doorway opened one cautious inch. But there was a cost. Lucas had to close his garage to regular work 3 days a week for training. He lost customers, lost income, lost sleep. And for a while, he lived on the edge of not enough again. When Rachel heard the ruling, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 11 years. Emily hugged Lucas tightly. "Thank you for not giving up," she whispered, standing on her own 2 feet. Lucas closed his eyes. For a moment, he felt Noah's presence so strongly it almost hurt. "I promised," he said. Months passed. The garage changed slowly. Not into something glossy, into something intentional. A small sign appeared near the door. Meyer Mobility Lab. Inside, the workbench remained scarred. The fan still clicked, but the space filled with new equipment, clipboards, a whiteboard covered in diagrams, and people who arrived carrying more hope than certainty. Lucas greeted everyone the same way, at eye level, with a question. "How does it feel? Where does it pull? When does the pain begin? What does your body do to survive it?" Emily returned often. She trained, learned, and eventually enrolled in rehabilitation sciences. She helped new patients not with speeches, but with patience, showing them what progress looked like on days when progress felt like nothing. Rachel's life shifted too. She stepped back from constant control, learning how to be present instead of powerful. Some days, she walked with Emily along the same beach where everything had gone wrong years earlier. "I don't blame you," Emily told her one afternoon as waves brushed their ankles. "I don't want you to blame yourself either." Rachel cried anyway, because some grief isn't solved by permission, only by honesty. Lily grew taller. She learned tool names. She asked better questions. One evening, after closing, Lucas found Lily at the workbench. She had her puppet in front of her, screwdriver in hand, brow furrowed with determination. "What are you doing?" he asked. Lily didn't look up. "I'm making it so it doesn't get stuck." Lucas watched her loosen the joint, test it, tighten it gently. Not force, not fear, just enough to let movement be itself. "Do bodies tell the truth like machines?" Lily asked. Lucas smiled softly. "More often." Later, when the garage went quiet, Lucas sat where Noah's shadow always seemed to fall at dusk. He spoke into the empty air, voice low. "We did it," he said. "Not perfectly, but honestly." The wind carried his words away. Years later, people would speak of what happened in terms of innovation and reform. They would write papers, debate policy, argue about where the line should be drawn. But Lucas remembered it differently. He remembered a question asked without authority, a system that learned, slowly, and a young woman taking her first steps without pain. On the wall of the lab, Lily taped up a drawing beside Emily's first rehab photo. It was a simple sketch, a stick figure girl walking, a stick figure dad kneeling, and a tiny puppet between them, its arm moving freely. Lucas looked at it and felt something settle in his chest, not triumph, not relief, a quiet kind of faith. Because in the end, the miracle was not that a body learned to walk again. It was that a world, for one moment, remembered how to listen. And that was enough to let hope move forward, one careful step at a time.